Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. An effective communication strategy plays an absolutely vital role in ensuring the success of any nationwide COVID-19 vaccine rollout. Public health communicators have to take into account the planning for each phase of the rollout and also reaching diverse yet specific audiences. So tonight on the show, we'll be speaking to two strategic and science communicators and we'll be asking them whether Malaysia has got its communication strategy right or whether we need to rethink our comms approach altogether. Our first guest tonight joins us from Sabah, Dr. Latif. He's the head of the research unit for University Malaysia Sabah and UNICEF's Communication for Development, or C4D, which is an approach of using evidence-based models in development social projects for measurable behavioral change. Dr. Latif, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Good evening. Looking at Sabah's registration rates for the vaccination program, it's quite worryingly low. It's one of the lowest vaccination registration rates in the country. But you recently wrote, Latif, that the low registration rates in Sabah can be attributed to communication strategies and the digital divide. And I'm hoping you could begin our conversation by elaborating a little bit on what you mean by that.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, Melissa and Sharaad. Thank you for having me and to share my opinions about this interesting topic about how to rethink the vaccines communication strategies. When you talk about the registration rate for vaccinations in Sabah, as of today, just 70% of its entire population, or the 80% herd community percentage. One of the problems that we see is the communication strategies. I mean, the government has done a lot in terms of their comm strategies. If I would like to make it simple, the communication strategies of the government has already answered the questions of when, where, how, and who. But there's one pertinent question that was, it seems that was left unanswered, and that is the why. And we see in here that this is one of the factors. I'm not saying that this is the most important factor, but one of the factors that contributing to the low registration rate in Sabah. And because people does not, if we ask, does people not aware about the vaccination exercise? No, people are aware. People know that Malaysia has the vaccines arrived. People know that vaccination is ongoing, but still the registration is very low. So
Latif, if I can interject now and ask you to help us understand the why, because it seems from a particular perspective, the why was very clear. It was herd immunity. It was about protecting the vulnerable. It was about protecting yourself from getting severe forms of the disease, if you were infected and so on and so forth. Is that not clear to many Sabahans?
That one is clear. I think if you're talking about the message of developing herd immunity, protecting yourself from getting serious effect from the virus, I think that is clear. What I mean by why is that people keep on asking, because this is based on my observations on the ground, my conversations with people on the ground. They said, why should we register early if the vaccine is not available yet? I think that is the open secret. People keep on asking. We have registered since 24th of February, but still, until now, we still haven't got the date for the registrations. So this is the why. I mean, people know the benefit of vaccines, yeah, but what is like is why they need to register early. As I shared in my article, perhaps people need to be told, people need to be informed that it all has something to do with the government's need to manage the logistics. So that is why the government needs people to register early so that they know which cities, which locations need more vaccines so that they can send the stock of vaccines over that particular venue or places. But if you go to the GKGAV website and you look at the FAQ, frequently asked questions, there is no answer for this particular question.
Okay, that's a really good point. But you also pointed to another thing that's quite interesting, that you'd have to go and actively search for this information. Go to this website of acronyms that I can't remember what the acronyms are, but you have to go and actively search for this information, seek it out, and it's almost always digitally provided on a digital platform. And I wanted to ask you about that, about the use of technology mediated communication. And while it can be quite effective in some urban areas, you also point out that it's less effective in the interior. So how do we mitigate this? How do we overcome the fact that the communication strategy has to go beyond just from the website and the My Sejahtera app? How do we deal with this?
For this one, I think the most the correct answers for this to overcome this problem is to enhance what I term as IPC, the interpersonal communications. This is where the government needs to mobilize all its machinery to go and to talk to people face to face, because that is the only way that you can do to overcome the digital divide. Particularly for the rural communities in Sabah. But there's also one point that we need to think here, that when you talk about digital divide, it's not only affecting the rural community, but it's also affecting some portions of the urban community. Like it's obvious when we do the registrations for the opt-in for the AstraZeneca for 60 over people, where the government and all the NGOs has to do face-to-face to see people, to help them to do the registration. So I think the government needs to really seriously consider to open up other means of registrations apart from doing registration through online. I mean, after that, they're already now opening up for phone call registrations, of course, through My Sejahtera. But what is like is we need face-to-face. Perhaps, I know resources are very limited, but mobile registration should be seriously considered, particularly in rural community, as well as to some portions of community in an urban area.
Latif, I understand that, in some of the statements that have been made by the agencies carrying out the registration, they make it very clear, at least in the Malay language, it says penduduk Malaysia, which just means you're a resident or you reside in Malaysia. It doesn't mean you're a warga negara or a citizen, right? And I wonder if in Sabah's particular case, the numbers of people who are either undocumented or have tenuous relationships, to the state and so on and so forth, is there a need to reach out to them in particular in different ways?
This is a very tricky issue you put me here to answer this. Yeah, for the undocumented group of people in Sabah, which is the number is quite high, and based on our work on the ground, the only way that I can see that we can reach these people is by mobilizing existing NGOs who is already have a very good connections with this group of people. Because when you talk about dealing with the undocumented, it is all about the trust. You need them to trust you. So you can't mobilize government agencies to get them to register for the vaccine. You need to mobilize those NGOs who they trust, who was working with them all this while.
Okay. And on that note, while we're talking about undocumented, getting the undocumented vaccinated, but also, in terms of the wider community, I'm just wondering, because you mentioned a bit earlier a very interesting point about understanding the why of the vaccination. Why is it important to register now? I'm wondering whether in your work with C4D, when you're trying to affect behavioral change when it comes to societal development programs, do you think that incentivizing might work? Should we be thinking about incentivizing the vaccination process, either through, something free or a cash incentive, or what do you think? Would that work in terms of changing behavior?
In some situations, that might work. I mean, we're talking about carrot and stick approach here. For vaccines, particularly in the rural community, I think that might work. Yeah, especially if you're talking about the understandings of the benefit of the vaccines. So by giving them some carrots, that might help. I'm not saying that it will work, but that might help. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's very interesting because I think many organizations, I was thinking recently the Party Socialist Malaysia made some proposals at a seminar, suggesting that, especially for undocumented workers in the peninsula, that maybe, a 1-year work permit would be good, or something like, free medical care, or Malaysian rates medical care for a year as an incentive for the undocumented. I do want to ask you though, these are all great proposals. Are these proposals percolating up to the people who are making decisions? Do you see communication strategies changing, adapting to the realities on the ground?
I don't really get your questions. Can you make it easier for me?
You make some really great suggestions. Are the people in authority listening to your suggestions? Are they changing and responding to them? I mean,
the policymaker, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw based on our the articles that we wrote earlier in March, proposing that the government should consider explaining the why. Then I see a bit of snippet of explanations from the government. I mean, I heard a few weeks ago, KG is talking about the needs, but KG is talking about explaining why people need to register earlier. But still, it's just a brief remarks. It's no further explanation. We see a lot of the communication is about fighting the anti-vaxxers, which at this stage, when we are racing against time, the percentage or the proportions of anti-vaxxers in Malaysia is actually not that high. It's just 60% based on a study conducted by MOH in December 2020, right? But it seems that we spend a lot of our time fighting with the anti-vaxxers, and we don't talk about getting those fence-sitter, the indecisive, to register early. So yeah, that is my idea. Yeah.
Excellent points. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. We appreciate your time and you sharing your insights and your perspectives, especially with your work on the ground. Thank you, Dr. Latif. We're going to take a quick break here on the show, but we'll be back with more on this topic. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned.
ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Induknya adalah Melayu
balik kepada Islam. This is
orang yang membuat
polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine, mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan kita boleh maju. Induknya adalah Melayu
Balik kepada
Islam.
This is
orang yang membuat
polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine, mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Kini berwajah baru.
Ini pula susulan khas pesawat Back Air di Kazakhstan. Pesawat berkenaan dilaporkan tergelincir 2 kali.
Notifikasi berita terkini dan navigasi mudah. Podcast dikemas kini dengan berita dan program.
Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope.
Serta video tanpa had dengan scroll tanpa henti. Buat turun aplikasi baru Astro AWANI sekarang.
Semua yang terjadi adalah berita, tetapi tiada siapa yang boleh bawakan yang terkini dan tergempar seperti kami.
Dilihat hanya memberi wang tanpa matlamat yang tepat. Dia tidak melakukan apa-apa kesalahan.
Untuk mendapatkan jawapan yang bermakna, kita perlu soalan yang tepat.
Amat sedih dengan apa yang berlaku ke atas.
Tiada ruang untuk berita palsu.
Negara kita telah merekodkan kes harian baru sebanyak
hanya fakta yang diberikan.
Amat penting untuk meneruskan perjuangan negara melawan pandemik ini.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our conversation about the role of an effective communication strategy in ensuring the success of a nationwide COVID-19 vaccination program. Dr. Mahaletchumy Arujanan is the Executive Director of the Malaysian Biotechnology Information Centre. She joins us on the show now. Dr. Maha, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Good evening. I'd like to begin
Good evening,
with
Melisa.
I'd like to begin our conversation with a look at today's third round opt-in registration for the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. I mean, there were tech difficulties, and there was this lottery-style registration, which I think proved to be quite stressful for the applicants, and the whole process left many people angry and frustrated with trying to get vaccinated. And I'm just wondering what you think needs to be done to address these frustrations, so it doesn't tip over into, from going from being enthusiastic about opting in for a vaccine to no longer interested in signing up. How do we avoid that from happening? What communication needs to take place?
I think, first of all, I would say I would look this in both angles. Now, I would also give the benefits of doubts to the government, to the agencies that's managing this, because no one has done this before, right? We have never gone on and opted in for a vaccine before. And this is a mass vaccination program nationwide. So I do give benefits of doubt to the agency that's managing this. But again, certain things has to be anticipated as well. Now, the other thing, what I would say about AstraZeneca is, personally, I think when many people were very skeptical about AstraZeneca, and today we see people are like going on in and really rushing to get that, putting in so many devices to book one slot. So I do see this in a positive manner as well, where the acceptance for vaccine has increased, the demand for vaccine has increased. So that's a positive aspect. Now, why did it happen? Because people saw that the first batch was taken up. So this is where we call, there is an influential effect. And there is also a syndrome where people don't want to be missing out. And I think this is a positive one. But then the government also fell short by not informing the people beforehand on how this can be done effectively, and the communication was not very effective on both the procedures of to book the vaccine, as well as the technique. Of course, the IT system was not good enough, I would say, and I personally, my friends are making a lot of there's so much of anger and frustration, and also the communication about the vaccine itself. I think that has to be beefed up.
Hey, Maha, I wonder if you you kind of point to a kind of irony, right? There's a herd mentality in this instance is actually quite good. It's like everybody's rushing to one point, so I'm going to join that queue and rush as well. But I wonder about, for the people who design a communication strategy, how difficult it must be. Because if you remember in the early days, the Pfizer RNA vaccine was something that people feared as well. And they said, oh, your DNA will change and so on and so forth. And suddenly, it's moved to AstraZeneca. It's like the fear shifts from the virus to the vaccine to side effects and so on and so forth. So how do you deal with this? I mean, is it a process of endless trying to catch up with people's fears and frustrations as well as desires?
Now, this is not new, Sharaad. This is completely, we communicators, we are so used to people raising the bar and moving from one aspect, one factor to another factor. When one is resolved, the Pfizer mRNA is resolved. I wouldn't say it's completely resolved. There are still people who want a traditional vaccine. So I think we should not say the job is done. Communication, continuous communication is important. But again, when the majority has accepted something, and then there are still new conspiracy theories, new fears that is just manufactured. So this is bound to happen. We saw that, we still see this in genetic engineering. When we try to rebut one and address one, they come up with another one. They come up with another one. So that is why people like me can keep our job, you see. So yes, I think communication has to be continuous. I don't think the job is done yet.
Well, the previous guest that we spoke to, Dr. Latif, he pointed out that, more needs to be done rather than just explaining the when, where, and how and who should get the vaccine, but the why behind why you should get the vaccine and why you should register for the vaccine as soon as possible. And I'm just wondering, when you think about the explanation of the why, Dr. Maha, do people really need to understand the science behind the disease, the vaccine, the delivery, the process, how it gets there, when and what time? Does all of that, do they need to be convinced of that to be convinced of signing up for the vaccine? Is that the why that we're talking about?
I think there are two whys here. I completely agree with Professor Latif. Just now, based on what you are saying, there are two why. One is the logistic why. Why should I sign up for AstraZeneca now? Why should I opt in for AstraZeneca? Or why should I go for it now? Why can't I wait until I'm later on? Why can't I wait until I can buy it from a private sector? So these are all the why, and how is it being done? So that has to be communicated. To me, being a science communicator, I think I'm more interested in the other why. Why is vaccine important? What is COVID? What does this vaccine give me? Why is, and all the different vaccines, why is this vaccine different from this vaccine? What is it going to do? What is it going to protect me from? Now, you see, when the frontliners got infected by after being vaccinated, there was a big question, and people said, now, why should I take the vaccine? Because even if I take the vaccine, I'm going to be infected. Now, that is a wrong perception, and that is a wrong message, because this vaccine in particular, at this time, more research needs to be done. But for us, we know it is as safe as it can be and as efficient it can be. So what it protects us is not completely from the disease. It protects us from death. It protects us from severity, where I'm going to completely have long-term, completely lose my senses, smell sense for lifelong. That is what the vaccine is going to do. So this why, for me, is very, very important. Now, having said that, you're also right on all the logistics, especially the logistics. I don't think it is... Now, I wouldn't say it's not done very well, because I took my daughters for vaccination and it was quite straightforward. My husband went today and he came very, very fast. So I still, as I said earlier, I would still, I think credit must go where people deserve it. As I said, we are living in an unprecedented time. So, but improvements can be made. But I think people are doing still a great job.
Okay, let's turn to science now. And, as you say, we want evidence-based information out there. But as you noted, I mean, it's also early days for both the understanding of the virus as well as the therapies that are being put forward to resolve them. The unknowns, like long-term side effects. If somebody says, well, I really don't know if I should take this, what are the long-term side effects? We talk about side effects, but only in terms of the short-term side effects of the vaccine. How would you address that? What is, in fact, unknowable because we just haven't had the time to see these things unfold?
Now, I think the first thing the public should know that there is no one technology that is zero risk. No scientist will tell you that driving a car is completely 100% safe, and any car for that matter. You can buy the most expensive car, but it still comes with a risk. So there is no technology without risk. And what we want to do now, especially with this vaccine, because it was developed at the fastest speed, we still are not sure whether this will be giving us a lifelong immunity or until when the immunity will stay, because that is being researched. But what has been researched and we know is the vaccine is safe except for some rare adverse effects. So having said that, it is important for the public to know that what this vaccine is going to, what it is going to provide. So the long-term effect, we are not very sure, but what is important now is weighing the risk of COVID itself and weighing the risk of the vaccine. That is the best we could do. And we all know the risk of COVID is quite scary at this moment.
Dr. Maha, if I may, just a quick question before we wrap up our conversation tonight. Not just about, encouraging people to get vaccinated, but the communication strategy also needs to address the fact that people are tired and they're fatigued. They talk about SOP fatigue. How do we, convince people that more needs to be done, apart from just saying stay at home and do your part? I mean, I'm wondering how effective photos of overrun ICUs and tired frontliners, those daily sky-high case numbers, are they still effective, or do we need to retweak our communication strategy?
Now, we have been listening to or hearing and reading so many negative news. Now, maybe we can give it a positive twist as well. So people are motivated. Of course, if we go to vaccine covid.gov.my and we go to My Sujatra, we can see how many people have been vaccinated. Now, instead of every day saying how many deaths, how many new cases, can we also see how many people have been vaccinated? I think that will give a positive twist. And that, like what Sharaad was saying, that will also give the herd mentality that, okay, this number of people have gone. That means I am missing out. I should also go. So I think it's time to give an overall picture instead of just giving us all those very depressing information. And also look at US now. US, many red zones have become green zones, and hospitals which were really at the peak admission and death, they have completely no cases now after only 50% of their population being vaccinated, even most of them with just one dose. So I think these are the positive news that we need to give the public now.
Right. Thank you so much for speaking with us on the show tonight. So it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Dr. Maha.
That's
all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. But before we leave you tonight, a reminder that you can get all the latest news and information on the COVID-19 vaccines on astroawani.com, as well as the Astro Awani app. Thank you so much for watching the show tonight. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
We'll be back with you same time tomorrow. Till then, good night.